Hello class, I hope you are doing well. Today we are going to learn about Chapter 12, Jacksonian Democracy and States' Rights. Now make sure you have your vocabulary finished for the next time we have class. I wrote down the terms here. You will use your textbook to look up the definitions, and you can write down the definitions as you're reading the section. But the vocab words that you are going to be responsible for are sectionalism, Andrew Jackson, John Quincy Adams, the corrupt bargain, Jacksonian democracy, spoils system, tariff of abomination, John C. Calhoun, doctrine of nullification, secede, and states' rights. Now I did include some terms that are not in the beginning of the section in the highlighted vocab, so make sure that you copy all of these down and get the definitions for them. All right, so our first section talks about sectionalism changes politics, the election of 1824. So you have presidential candidates, John Quincy Adams, William Crawford, Andrew Jackson, and Henry Clay. You will see that different parts of the United States, different sections, support different candidates. So first, we have New Englanders support John Quincy Adams. Southerners supported William Crawford as well as Andrew Jackson. And Westerners supported House Speaker Henry Clay as well as Andrew Jackson. Voter turnout in the election of 1824 was 27%. Okay, keep that in mind for next election. With this election, it was 27%. So the outcome, our electoral votes. John Quincy Adams had 84, Andrew Jackson had 99, and Henry Clay 37. Now, since Andrew Jackson did not get a majority of electoral votes, the vote, according to the Constitution, then went to the House of Representatives. Now, remember, Andrew Jackson, he actually also won the popular vote, but he did not have the majority of electoral votes, so the vote went to the House of Representatives. Remember, Henry Clay is our House Speaker. So what happens? Henry Clay, even though he doesn't really like John Quincy Adams, he doesn't like Andrew Jackson even more, okay? So he tells his supporters, vote for John Quincy Adams, not Andrew Jackson. Now, maybe he actually thought John Quincy Adams, was the best candidate, but it seems a little sketchy because guess who was named president? John Quincy Adams. The House of Representatives voted, and they voted for John Quincy Adams, even though he did not have the majority of the popular vote. Or in the beginning, when they first did the electoral vote, Andrew Jackson had more than him. Now, this is where it gets a little sketchy. John Quincy Adams, like we said, him and Henry Clay did not really get along, yet he named Henry Clay his Secretary of State. So Jackson supporters could not believe this. They were outraged, and they said this was a corrupt bargain. You guys met, you made this deal together so you would both get something positive out of it, and Andrew Jackson was left in the dust. So we have John Quincy Adams is named president, and Henry Clay is Secretary of State. Now this did not go over very well with Jackson's supporters. Jackson believed that he was robbed of the presidency, that this was not fair. And so campaigning for the next election starts right away. And it was nasty campaigning. I mean, I'm sure you have seen on TV or heard advertisements about, people running for elective office, and sometimes it can get nasty. It is nothing new. I mean, they were very nasty during this time as well. So during Andrew Jackson's campaign now, he stresses that he wants to support majority rule and what the people want, because like I said, he felt like this was stolen from him and this isn't what the people wanted. So now we can move on to the election of 1828. John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson were both part of the Democratic Republicans. They were the same party, but tension between them, it actually split the party. So we have Democrats, you'll see how it's split with the name too. Democrats supported Jackson. And like I said, he claimed to represent the common man, and he also claimed that John Quincy Adams represented the privileged, wealthy Easterners. The National Republicans supported John Quincy Adams. So, voter turnout is 58% this time, so it more than doubles from the last election. Electoral votes come in, and guess who wins? Jackson, 178, Adams, 83. So Andrew Jackson was named president. Now remember how I said that Jackson supported the common man? He never went to college, and a lot of people, regular workers and farmers, not the privileged, supported him. And so when he was inaugurated, you had all these people coming in to see his inauguration, and it was wild, okay? They had, dishes were broken, glasses were broken, people were trying to rush in to meet the president. It was very rowdy. They say that actually Andrew Jackson had to escape, from the mob coming in. And now just imagine the elite, used to established order in the White House and inaugurations, and they see these crowds of people, these mobs, their china dishes broken. I mean, it was a mess. They probably think, what is happening, to the presidency, and all these people coming in. So we said Jackson promises to look out for the common person. He's common people, supports majority rule, and he said that government is no longer controlled by the powerful, educated elite, and this is called Jacksonian democracy, all right? He also introduces the spoils system. What Jackson did when he came into office, he fired a lot of government officials that were already in there, and he brought in his own people, okay, to take these government jobs. He said, we're switching things over, we're keeping it fresh, and that was his explanation of what he was doing, getting new ideas in there. People that did not support Jackson said, wait a second, you are bringing in people who just supported you. If they gave you money in your election and helped you to get elected, then you just gave them a government job. You spoiled them, you just gave them a government job. And they also claim, what is this going to change our government into? Because now you are hired not based on your qualifications and your education, but just if someone supported you, you're going to put that, in that government position. We have rising sectional differences. Now we saw when people were electing the president, you had different sections of the United States voting for different presidents. And we're going to see the same thing with three hot topics at the time: the sale of Western land, the government spending money on internal improvements, and also the issue of tariffs. So let's start with Western land. Northeasterners wanted Western land sold at high prices. Southerners also wanted Western land sold at high prices, but Westerners wanted their land sold at lower prices. So the Northeasterners and the Southerners wanted it sold at high prices because they wanted to get as much money as they could out of those Western lands. Westerners, and let me back up a second, Northeasterners were afraid that if they sold Western lands at low prices, that people from the Northeast would move into the West. And the Northeast was a region of factories, and they didn't want to lose people. They needed as many people to work the factories as they could get, and they were afraid that people might leave and then they'll lose their workforce. So Westerners wanted their land sold at cheaper prices so that they could buy land, and so it was more convenient for them. Our next issue, spending federal money on internal improvements. Well, the North supported it because they were benefiting from these improvements. These internal improvements were making roads from the Northeast to the West, and railroads, better transportation. So Northeasterners would benefit from this. So they thought, yeah, let's spend the money on internal improvements. Southerners opposed federal spending on internal improvements, and you'll see when we come to tariffs, it's because they were the ones who were paying for it through the tariffs, which we'll get to, but they weren't really benefiting from these internal improvements because it was more north that things were happening. And Westerners supported federal spending on internal improvements because, like I said, they were benefiting because most of the improvements were done linking the Northeast to the West. So next we come to tariffs. Northeasterners supported high tariffs. So a tariff is a tax on imported goods. This would make American-made goods less expensive. So Northeasterners like this because the money made from that we will use for internal improvements, but they also liked it because Northeasterners had the factories. They wanted people to buy the American-made goods. Southerners, on the other hand, did not like it at all. Since they grew their cotton, they traded a lot with England, and so they were the ones who were paying these tariffs. And they thought, this is not fair at all. We are paying the tariffs for the money to go elsewhere. The North is getting whatever they want. We're paying the money to help the North out. So they did not like it at all. And the Westerners also supported that was back on the improvements. Okay, so the tariffs basically, we're looking at Northeasterners and the Southerners. So the federal government versus the state. We're coming down to this tariff issue, okay, with the North and the South. It is a very tough issue, and we're going to look at this. We have states' rights, have it going in one direction, and a strong federal government going in another. The South believes in states' rights, saying we as states, if we think a law is not going to benefit us, we should be able to veto, cancel it out, not follow it. The state should have the rights. Other people supported strong federal government. They said, no, the federal government has the most power, and you need to listen to us, that the federal government can do what they must to hold the Union together, the United States together. So our tariff issue. In 1828, Congress passed a bill to raise tariffs. Well, how do you think the South felt about that? The South called this new bill a tariff of abomination. An abomination is a hateful thing. Vice President Calhoun, now this is Jackson's vice president from South Carolina, created the doctrine of nullification, saying that if the federal government creates a law that we don't like, we can say it's void. No, we're not going to follow it. The result? Jackson requested to lower the tariffs, and Congress did. But that wasn't good enough for South Carolina. They nullified the Tariff Acts of 1828 and 1832, and they voted to build their own army. I mean, think of the tension between the states, South Carolina, and the federal government. What's going to happen? I mean, they're going to build even their own army. South Carolina threatened to secede if the government tried collecting these tariffs. Secede, break away from the Union. We're not going to be a part of the United States anymore if you come and try to collect these taxes. It is a huge problem. Think of the possible outcomes. So what if a state could, nullify a federal law? They didn't like it, so this state, just doesn't decide to follow it, or that state doesn't follow this federal government, law. So there were many debates about, what should be happening, and we'll see the conclusion. States' rights supported by Vice President Calhoun, and a strong federal government was supported by Jackson. And you can see they're going in different directions. There was a lot of tension between Jackson and Calhoun. So in the 1832 election, Jackson won without Calhoun as his running mate. Okay, because there was differences. He ran with someone else. Jackson also said that he was willing to use force to support the Union. And you will see in one of our primary documents that we use in class, it's actually Jackson's letter talking about force and using it against South Carolina, which is very interesting. Well, there was a compromise. Henry Clay developed a plan to lower tariffs by 10%. Congress passed it, and South Carolina accepted it. Whew. The crisis was over for now. We're going to see later on how the tension between the federal government and South Carolina, again, how they butt heads. But some questions I want you to think about. What political divisions appeared during the election of 1824? How did American democracy change during Jackson's presidency? How did economic issues increase sectional tensions? And finally, what issues were at stake in the debate over states' rights? Thank you.